Hi, welcome to the next episode of Triggers in Spiritual Medicine, where we address hard topics in the intersectionality of all the things that are ailing our world, whether it's homelessness, domestic violence, chronic health issues. There's an underlying issue that is the foundation of a lot of things that are dysfunctional in our society. Today, we're going to talk about, we don't have a guest on this season, this episode, and that's for a reason. I listen and trust when I connect with my spirits and my guides. And for those who don't know me, it might be new to this podcast. My name is Laura Bonetzky-Joseph, and I'm the founder of Healing with Spirit. I am a trauma survivor who was diagnosed with complex PTSD, who spent 17 or actually 18 plus years now engaged in family court abuse, post-separation, and vexatious litigation. And I have been very active as part of the TRACK Coalition, where I have testified on 11 different bills in the state of Massachusetts, varying from coercive control, vexatious litigation, a moratorium on the women's prison, alternative therapies, and more. So the reason why I'm bringing this up, because this episode, I was trying to figure out what and how to use my voice for this platform. And I feel like, and I'm hoping that this comes out in the way I hope. So I'm labeling this facing the hard truths. Okay. And I want to give you 3 steps at the end, or maybe weaved in, because I tend to go very organically on how to do that in the wake of what is happening between Israel and Gaza. Now, why, from me, I can only speak for me personally and what I've been witnessing. My father's father immigrated from the Ukraine. My father's mother immigrated from Russia. Watching my grandfather's hometowns be bombed has been very hard. And like other, and I can only speak for myself and a few people that I've spoke to that are Americans, that we have been extraordinarily triggered by what we're seeing in Gaza and Israel. I'm not going to go into finger pointing, but I will be addressing the underlying issues, okay, which is really foundational to the collective trauma. And how do we, bearing witness to the atrocities and the genocide being committed in lifetime, how can we take action, both in our lives to kind of change the future and trajectory for our children and our children's children and future generations to come, as well as for those that are currently being disenfranchised? As somebody who has, on the surface appears to be very white privileged, I grew up in a very upper middle class town. My father was a doctor, my mother was a nurse. My father did grow up poor in a very poor neighborhood just south of Boston in a town called Roxbury. And we did, even though we lived in an upper middle class town or a middle class town, depending on perspective, we did live on things like hot dogs and spaghetti because we couldn't afford more expensive meals, because we had to put on the mask that we were wealthier than we were. And I did write these 2 books here, which can tell you everything you need to know about my story and growing up with multi-generational abuse and trauma, and as well as family members who have experienced genocide in one factor or another, from a generational standpoint. That one of the things I have learned over the near 20 years is, how do we heal this? How do we address this? How do we take action? How do we know what's true and what's not true? So let's just start with, how do we know what's true and not true? If we're watching the news 24/7, okay, especially if it's biased news. I have seen a shift in the news in the past, actually 24 hours, because of their way to deliver and show things that they were denying a week ago. So how do we know what's true? The first thing is get out of here and get into the body. So I call it the stop, pause, breathe, and then listen. And it's not listen what your thoughts are, because the chances are your thoughts are part of the collective consciousness, which is not necessarily true. If you listen and you get into the body and there's a level of stillness, the body is kind of like the megaphone to your soul. Your soul knows the truth. Your spirit knows the truth better than me, better than anybody. And it's within that little whisper that we will know the truth. And when we know the truth, it will highlight maybe what actions to take. And some of you might be saying, but Laura, I can't seem to quiet my mind. I can't seem to bypass here to get in here. Well, that's why you need to actually probably work with folks, whether myself or others that do similar work, to do the second phase, which is unpacking. Okay. That means unpacking internal dialogue, the inner critic, and part of that inner critic is foundation. So if, again, I like to go, let's address the root issues, right? My dad was an osteopathic physician. So I was always taught as an osteopath, when he was an osteopath, it was all about rooting out issues to chronic illness. Okay. Well, I got an earache. Well, just because what's in your ear doesn't mean that's what the cause is, right? The cause might be you ate something that was inflammatory that caused something in your gut, and now you got an earache, right? So it's what is the root cause? And one of the things I have been doing with trauma survivors as part of my work for the last 4 or 5 years, especially in the past 4 or 5 years, has been unpacking. And the unpacking in the areas of unpacking our inner misogyny, unpacking our inner patriarchal conditioning, unpacking our inner racism, unpacking our church indoctrination, unpacking all of those things that have been taught to us by societies with histories of oppression. Okay, when we can do this, and I've done this with even rape survivors, because when I hear a rape survivor, they start self-blaming and they self-shaming, and I start looking at it like that's our own inner misogyny, because it's like that's what's been conditioned. It doesn't necessarily mean we believe it, but the belief there is there because of something that was put on us. So it still exists. This is kind of like the polar dynamics of things, right? So we have to unpack those inner biases in order to see the truth. Because if we can't unpack that, then we can't see the truth. And the bias and the stuff that's running in the subconscious, like in your computer, will come forward whether you realize it or not. We also have to unpack our generational trauma, our personal trauma. We have to stop, especially as women, we have to stop saying my trauma is worse than yours or mine's more significant than yours. And the one narrative that I see playing out in Israel and Gaza is, well, my parents were a Holocaust survivor. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors. The Palestinians deserve everything that they get for what they did to us. And the truth be told, there is, and it's coming from Israeli media, that it wasn't Hamas that bombed or so-called beheaded and burned babies. It was actually the Israeli army that didn't care of the casualties of war that they launched against Hamas. And that's a really hard pill to swallow, right? So this is facing the hard truths. It is facing like this is what is hard. We have these traumas. We maybe have gone through a lifetime of feeling like we've never been heard. Nobody has really validated. We haven't gotten justice. And you're talking to somebody who still hasn't gotten justice in my case. But I'm still not going to project my wounds, if I can help it, onto somebody else. And I have gotten actually pretty good that if my wounds are projecting, I can see how far I've come and what areas I still need to work on, right? So when we look at like what I see in my story, and November is Family Court Awareness Month. to be honest, from a personal perspective, I found this not so much what Hamas did to Israel, but the reaction of Israel calling every Palestinian, including children and babies, animals that need to be dealt with, cutting off their water, cutting off food supplies, cutting off medical supplies, bombing ambulances, hospitals. Doctors Without Borders has come out and speaking about this. This stuff is fact. It is not propaganda. That is not a just response. And that actually triggered the shit out of me. Why? Because as a domestic violence survivor, I'm sitting there going like, hey, please help me. Please stop the pain. Please help protect my kids. And basically, our systemic oppressive system in the United States basically said, well, he has the money, he has the power, so we're just going to believe him over you. Not that we don't believe you. It's just that he's got the money and the power and the might, and he can destroy you. So we're just going to side with him. Okay. And that is kind of, and I had to sit with that. I'm like, well, what does what I went through in family court have anything to do with Israel and Palestine and the Gaza? Like, and it had to do with systems of oppression. And I feel like that was what was surfacing for me. But the thing is, I wouldn't have been able to even connect that or to address that wound, and hopefully in a proper way if I wasn't able to do what I call these three things. Stop, actually, four things really. Stop, pause, breath, meaning and that creates space. When we can create space for the other voices that are connected to the soul that typically aren't as loud as our heads or as loud as our trauma response voice, then we will know and we go, oh, okay, now I see. I may not understand what the links are, but I can see why my brain wanted to go there. Now, what do I do? What do I do? So, this is kind of like when we talk about the intersectionality, right? What I see is the intersectionality in a lot of these things. And a lot of and we go root it out, right? And here's my notes, by the way, for the day. Like, this is what I kind of wrote, my notes, okay? So so you guys get to see, right? Like, right? So here's what I said, the three things. Here's what I said, and here's like intersectionality, traumas, all these things. Male violence, right? We just had a mass shooting here in Maine, okay, our neighboring state where 18 were murdered. And I did do a post on the number one predictive precursor to mass shootings is domestic violence. Yet domestic violence is grossly ignored and often not dealt with in the United States and elsewhere. It has gotten it has gotten significantly worse. And if you look at the numbers with domestic violence that has increased, our numbers of mass shootings have paralleled and significantly increased. Okay. And it is not a mental health. A lot of mainstream media will go, oh, but it's mental health. We need to get more resources. We need some more help so this doesn't happen. It's an atrocity. But yet, ask any survivor of abuse what the number one argument that abusers use against their victims. Your Honor, um, she's mentally unstable. She can't take care of herself. She can't take care of the kids. She's like, she needs to go see a shrink somewhere. She needs to be locked up somewhere. She needs like whatever. Meanwhile, they're deflecting their abuse. And most times when protective parents, which we mischaracterize trauma for mental illness or grief for mental illness, because when We have 58,000 children that are legally trafficked by way of family courts. This is a fact. This is not whatever. It is a fact. Then now what happens, right? And so we keep giving abusers more and more and more, like what happened in Maine. The guy was actually put into a psych hospital for whatever reason this past summer and was still allowed to not only maintain his guns, he was able to teach people how to shoot guns. But my pathway is really it's the root issues. What are the root issues? It is not mental illness, because here's the thing: women carry the majority of mental health diagnosis by a significant margin. I don't know the exact number, but it is something like 80%, over 20%. Okay. And I want you to sit here and stop, pause, and think how many of those committed mass shootings or mass violence? How many of them are connected to wars, genocide, and gender violence? Think about that. None, or maybe like less than 1%. Okay. So the root issue is male entitlement, male superiority, and male violence. And for men who are working this, if this is triggering for you, then my call to you is to do the work. I know there are so many men out there that get it. And this is my call to you to please step up. We can't end the genocides like we are witnessing in live time in Gaza or in the Congo or in Sudan or in Armenia or in Ukraine, like we are witnessing in real time. Even the children that are being lost in the system of abuse and trauma. We need you men to rise up and also unpack and do the men's work. And the women who are trauma bonding, you are shooting yourself in the foot. And I'm just not even going to go into it. I'm just going to say, listen to the episode on my podcast. I think it's episode 5, on how the burning times of witches influence white women culture today. And that will highlight all the things that we have been conditioned for centuries and why we have been conditioned to believe the things that we believe. Because again, if we are facing these hard truths, we don't know what to change. I believe everybody who's on this podcast right here, right now, really all want the same thing. We want to end violence. We want a future for our children, and we want peace in the world. How we get there, from my 20 years experience, is we have to face these difficult truths. We have to clean up our own backyards, because we can't fix everything else that's going around us until we fix here and unpack and heal and address some of these really difficult truths and understand the intersectionality, because the generational trauma and the trauma that's left on the soil, the energy of what's left on the soil, is vibrating extraordinarily high. We are in a very crucial point in history where either humanity is going to survive and thrive, or humanity is going to start facing extinction. And this is the call to action. And I'm giving you the plan. I am telling you how to do it. I am giving you ways to do it. And these is by facing these hard truths, which might make you feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know, I'm just one person and look at this gigantic thing that just popped up now. And I will just say to you, you are a piece to the larger puzzle. You are not the solution in itself, but together we are stronger together. And if we all continue to unpack, address our hidden biases, face those hard truths and our contribution to how we created this toxic situation that's happening worldwide, then we will know how to move forward. And it's one day at a time, and it's a lot of work. What if we want a future for our children, and we want peace in the world, and we want more sustainability? This is the work that needs to be done. The systems of oppression need to be broken down, and it can only be broken down in unity of the people. Or else we are back to the days of kings and serfdoms where gluttony and greed destroyed everything and destroyed lands and destroyed cultures. And then we come back 1,000 years later and we go, oh, we got to excavate. Oh, we can't find anything. No, it doesn't have to be that way. Our courage has to be stronger in our fear in this one aspect. And it means that we take personal responsibility and we work on these aspects. This title right here of this book is Feisty, Dangerously Amazing Women Using Their Voices to Make an Impact. So I understand the anger and rage and fear that I see collectively. I see it very clearly. What I don't agree with is how we're using our anger and fear. And it's like, oh, we're going to do this. And if we vote this way, you know, we're going to tank the US and this and that. And it's like, that anger and rage is only breeding more anger and rage. It doesn't fix the problem. It just feeds the problem. So again, let's go back. In order to face these hard truths, we need to stop. We need to pause. We need to take a few breaths. Good deeps, right? In for 5, out for 5. And if you don't feel like you succeed at that, this is a repetition game. This is not a, I'm going to do it once and all of a sudden I got clarity game. Because if you need to know what actions to take, the only person that knows is you. And it's not in here, it's in here. When you are connected to your source energy, the one thing that the patriarchal system, the fascists, the churches, all of it want to take away from you. They want you to not know that power. And I'm saying reclaim it. Reclaim it. Because the future generations are depending on you right here, right now. And turn off the propaganda. Learn to know how to spot, because they're all in it for money. And I don't know, maybe because I've been doing trauma work for so long, I can smell bullshit from a mile away. You know, when you get on the air and you go, well, and the first thing out of your mouth is you go, well, it's, and you're just naming groups. Well, it's the Democrats or it's the Republicans and it's Soros and it's Black Lives Matter. Like they're to blame for everything. That's like me saying, well, my anxiety is causing my problem, so I need a medication. Instead of saying, no, what are you feeling? What does the anxiety feel like? How about we start going and saying, like, when you start saying it's Black Lives Matter, it's this, or it's the Republicans, or it's the Democrats, you lose the opportunity for solution. The solution is bigger than that. And the rest of it is just to divide you. They do not want us united. Imagine what we can do. There's a reason why they want to ban TikTok, people. And now it's not because of communications or whatever the other bill is. It is because the Palestinians have a voice there. Real life footage is coming out of dead bodies and babies every day, and I'm tired of seeing it. But the only way to change it is doing the things that we're doing. I'm not going to say ban TikTok because it doesn't fit the narrative of what the Israeli government wants you to believe. Talk about Darvo tactics one-on-one in real life. You want to know what Darvo tactics looks like? Just go watch the ads that are being sold on all the social media platforms by Israel. And every single one of it is a Darvo tactic playing that they are victim and they're defending their homeland when they're the only ones with tanks, planes, bombs on a population that has no water, no food. Think about it. Think about it. That's the truth. That's the hard truth we have to look at. And that's happening here in this United States in family courts in real time as well. On the lower income families, they just go, oh, we'll just take your kids and take them away from you. You know, either give them to foster care or adoption. And the upper middle class families, they're taking them and putting them in reunification camps, which is just like what Gaza is, and interrogating these children to force them to change their stories about their abusers and taking them away from families and loved ones and all of that. And if you don't believe me, I'm not going to go into a whole thing about it. Go watch episode, I forget the number, but it's in June. It was the July episode of 2023. I think it was episode 23. I'm not sure. But check out that episode. We talk about that in depth. And yes, there were children. Go look up Maya and Sebastian. God bless them. Maya's going to be doing amazing, wonderful things. But she was taken away from friends, family, schools, and basically locked into a room with her mother until she gave in. If you know anything about tactics of war and brainwashing, this is high level. And thank you, California and Governor Newsom, for finally signing the Peake's bill to ban reunification camps. Folks, this is happening here. I lived it. And this is the stuff, this is the intersectionality. We don't like what's going on over there, but we have to fix here first. We can't help there until we help here, except for support Doctors Without Borders, because Israel was bombing them too. Doctors Without Borders is an all-volunteer organization for the most part, and they're there with their doctors, their teams, and surgical teams in a humanitarian crisis. And Israel is bombing them. Think about that one. So these are the hard truths. We get here, and then we go, how do we move forward? And I feel like I still struggle. I feel like even as I'm recording this, I am still struggling with how do I talk about this? How do we move forward? Because it's an ever going in and making sure and getting clarity and making sure that I can communicate. Because me losing my voice with what I went through was the one thing that I've had to learn to reclaim. And we are going in next phase in May. We actually have 3 spots left for anybody who wants to do this work. I'm going to Ireland it's a pilgrimage to Ireland in May of 2024. Currently, at the timing of this broadcast, we had 3 spots left. And we're going to go unpack patriarchal conditioning. We're going to unpack the English indoctrination and the church indoctrination that happened to my Irish ancestors, indigenous ancestors. And we're going to go to sacred lands that are 6,000 years old, that despite wars and everything else, the energy there, the feeling and the connection to the ancestors are so strong. And we're going to go there and we're going to reclaim the things that were stolen from our ancestors. That's what we're going to do. That's what we can do. And if we each one of us do that work, whether you come with me to Ireland or not, I mean, you can do it still here. That's how we're going to change the dynamics. It isn't going to be with who's going to be president in the next election. It's not, a part of it isn't going to matter because we're just not there collectively yet. We're just not. And that's another hard truth. but we can maybe stop the growing fascism and dictatorships that are happening all over the world by just doing this work. And that's what I'm calling on all of you to do. Please leave your comments. Let me know if this helped you. Let me know if this kind of opened your eyes a little bit to maybe the intersectionality of things, so we can look at how we're showing up, how we're reacting to these situations in a much more effective manner. And if there are topics you would like to hear about moving forward, we have a couple great guests coming up, including we have an astrologer coming up regarding the 2024 energy forecasts and a few others. So let me know in the comments what you would like to do. And thank you for liking, following, sharing, engaging this podcast, Triggers in Spiritual Medicine. Until next time, have a great day.